It was very similar. It was always no before yes. And I just want to share, bring up something that Maranatha shared, that she also had this endless list of don'ts. Oh gosh. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. It sometimes sounds like we all have the same parents, because it was the don't do this, don't do that, or especially if you're a woman and a racialized woman, sometimes it's protection. Sometimes it's just, this is how you should be as a woman. This is not womanly, or not how to be, or you have to represent your family, or you have to represent your people. And so the pressures of that can also create a long list of don'ts and very few things to do. Something Maranatha also writes is, oh, here are some do's for us, right? Don't do a whole bunch of things that would embarrass your family, but do become engineer, doctor, lawyer. When I was going through school, engineering wasn't as big, especially for women. So accountant was my option that I took, not because I wanted to be an accountant per se, but I just didn't want to be a doctor or a lawyer. So thank you for chiming in there, Maranatha. Very relatable. And yeah, I feel like we are sisters from a similar family, or at least similar experiences, right? Which is the beauty of sharing these stories as well, so we can recognize we're not alone, and maybe build some community together that way. So yes, my experience, no before yes. I remember going to geek camp, as I call it, when I was about 10 years old, because in the same vein of, why would you engage necessarily in sports unless it can make you money, or unless you could be number one at that sport? But it was all about school and being great at school. So I was in a program for gifted students, and the geek camp, as I gently call it, was on a university campus when I was 10 years old one summer. And I took, math or other kind of academic type programs and activities as part of that camp. But the one thing I wanted to do that wasn't academic was to take tennis lessons as part of this camp. And I'd never done it before, and I wanted to try it. And I am a smaller built person. I'm under 5 feet as a fully grown adult. And so as a kid, I was also very small. And so my parents, bless their hearts, with the best of intentions, wanted to protect me. They thought I would be too physically weak, and therefore I would get hurt swinging a big, heavy tennis racket. And intuitively, I knew that didn't make sense. Like, other children are playing tennis and they're offering this to kids at a camp. Sure, those kids are bigger than me physically, but they're not adults either. So a lot of these types of situations came up where, how come other kids get to do it, but I don't? Here's kind of a funny example of when I was, I don't know how old I was there, maybe 3 or 4. It was my first Halloween, first time going out for Halloween as a kid. And first time going out for Halloween as a kid. And one of the things that my parents were deathly afraid of was me catching cold. Now, I don't know if any of you also had this, potentially an immigrant fear, potentially an Asian parent fear of, wind on your exposed like windpipes or chest, or not being able to go to bed with wet hair. Not that I wanted to, but all these things that would somehow, I would catch pneumonia and like die in my sleep. And so this is me, embarrassingly, being a very big bird. This is Big Bird from Sesame Street, if you couldn't tell. Big because I had an entire snowsuit on underneath my Big Bird plastic costume, which looks cute today, but the fact that I remember it so clearly is because I was embarrassed. And I didn't want to wear a big snowsuit underneath my Big Bird costume, and the other kids weren't doing it, especially the white kids. And so there also came up maybe a cultural divide, or at least an impression I had, that this is what the Canadian kids or the white kids were allowed to do. But as a Chinese kid, I wasn't allowed to do that. And why not? And is this a cultural difference? Is this a family difference? It's so hard to tell. Sometimes these things get intertwined, right? So it's, I can kind of laugh at it. It's a little cute picture of a little pudgy kid. But at the same time, I know that translates into some internalized beliefs and thinking of not only, my personal health or safety, but just what was okay for me versus what was okay for others, and what I needed to do to make up for things. So if I wanted to be like other kids and go out for Halloween, I couldn't I couldn't look quite like them or couldn't be quite like them because I had to wear the heavy snowsuit and they didn't. And there's so many ways that this metaphor translates into later life.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a little bit of my childhood experience, Jen.
Yeah, I thank you for sharing that. And when I think about my own experience, when my mom left her country to come to this foreign world of America, she was also a young woman herself. Like, she was 20 years old when she came here. So what did she know about life at that point? So I think they were trying to wing it at the same time. And there is a cultural stigma around help. What does help look like? And I think for my mom, asking for help was hard. And when she met my stepfather, I think he solved a lot of challenges she faced with navigating an unknown world. So she, being a female, kind of just depended on him so much, my stepfather. And my stepfather came from a very, and from a northern part of Vietnam where it's very strict upbringing, very, you follow authority, your old elders knows best. And I think he had that belief as a young man himself, raising now, a new wife with her child, 4-year-old child. And so he really made the impression on me that no one else knows anything that's best for me except for them. And so if I ever challenged it, it was very much of a no, like, you want to take risks, well, that's dumb. You don't want to go to college here, well, that's dumb. So it was, like you said, it was just so much more of a control thing for my family. Again, not ill-intended, but I think they thought that they did know what was best for me. And when you don't make decisions yourself, of course, how can you ever think about risk-taking? And when you're surviving and trying to put food on the table, of course, risk-taking is not something you would want to try because you want more guarantees. But yeah, I don't know what life would have been like if my mom had that space to be innovative and creative. I think she just had to. She was alone as a single parent with a young child and embraced this guy who had all this like confidence and arrogant, like, he kind of came up my father to this stepfather still this day, very arrogant and stubborn about his views of the world. And she gravitated to that because maybe that was comfortable. And when we think about risk taking, we always want to gravitate as human beings to what's comfortable. And safety and security could just feel like comfortable to my family.
Absolutely.
So thank you. I'm sharing this. I'm like reflecting live right now, just as we're doing. I didn't even think about these things, like, because I challenged my mom the other day. It's like, why did you never let me go out when I was little? She was like, I don't know why I didn't let you go out. I was like, thanks, Mom. You just didn't really realize what you were doing back then. And she gets to reflect, and I'm happy to give her that space to reflect today too.
I love how real real time produces like real conversation, right? So I love how real you're being with your reflection, and thank you for being so open with it live, right? As we're streaming live. And you raise a really great trauma informed point as well, that, we might make all sorts of assumptions or impressions about why our parents or why people around us that are influencers, why they behave the way they did, but so often they don't even know. And that's how trauma works. Like, we will respond in ways that are pretty automated, and we don't necessarily have clear intention or thought behind it. And neither do our parents or our family members or our coworkers. It's just how we've always responded. And that's a buildup of many different things. It's interesting too, Maranatha, thank you for being so engaged with us. We really love your comments. I find it fascinating how the degree to which the fear, like the what could go wrong aspect, it's not just that we learn from our influences not to take the risk, but part of it is that the risk I guess our evaluation of risk might be skewed because, as you say, Maranatha, it's you will catch your death, and just like a little bit of wind, this opening I have in my dress right now would be like, oh, you got to cover that up, not for modesty, but so that I don't catch my death of cold either. It's like, how do we start with, I'm just going out with a dress to I'm going to die of pneumonia or bronchitis or something, like the extremes to which these risks get taken or get evaluated as. It's interesting too, right? And of course, that also will influence how we assess our situations. And maybe actually, Jen, you could help us tie together if you've had a chance to reflect. How do you see this impacting the way you behave at work? And in your current life today?
Yeah, it definitely manifests itself in ways that don't align, at least in the American system, in the corporate system in America, where it is, although I would say that we've made some progress today in terms of being a more compassionate workplace, but we're still not there yet. It's still very much, sink or swim. Who do you know? Being vulnerable in some organizations can come across as weakness or lacking competency. So how can you bring your whole self to work? It's still a work in progress. But the way it manifested for me is, like even in going to college, I was a commuter college. I went to a very expensive private university, and I never experienced that college life. I very much commuted back and forth from home, and I've never, even to this day, as an adult, traveled alone. Like, I travel for work, of course, because I have to work. I have to go to work. But I've never decided to just pick up my bags and go somewhere by myself. It's so clearly that protectionism place that my parents instilled in me in terms of don't go outside, don't do this, don't have a second glass of Coke or something, made such a big impact on my life choices as an adult. Where this light anxiety that comes from being out in the open. So yeah, no, I savor small spaces. I told my husband I would love to just live in a condo. I don't need all of these big spaces. And is it because I just grew up in a confined space? And so that's my comfort zone, is being confined. But yeah, it doesn't work that well in the corporate environment. It is so much, like I said, it's sink or swim. I had this impression that I need to have all the answers, because my parents never really showed me what it looked like to ask for help. So I spent a lot of time in my corporate world, kind of shy around when it came to networking. I never felt comfortable in spaces where people were very alpha, very assertive. It just made me very uncomfortable. So I had light anxieties with networking, even though, we have to do that in the corporate world, is networking. I also felt like advocating for myself didn't feel good either. There was something about just telling people what I was good at was a challenge for me, because I didn't really experience that in my childhood. My parents were more about what aren't you good at? It was really good at, they were pointing out, but they never really praised. Praise wasn't something that we experienced in my household growing up. So it was always getting A's was expected. So there's no praise. Going to a great university, no praise there, because that was expected. Doing anything off of their mind was then not allowed, right? So advocating was hard, because there was a belief that it felt greedy or just not a humble thing to do, to praise yourself. And you need to do that in the workplace to be successful. Another challenge is that when I became a new manager, I should have just told people that I really didn't know how to be a manager. I really wish I could go back and own it and felt comfortable in my own skin. I could have navigated just my entry from individual contributor to leading others, that it wasn't something I knew how to do. They don't teach you that in school either.